The settlement of Delta Haven lay silent under a dull red sky. The wind carried fine dust that clung to every roof and every window. Inside a narrow metal shelter, a little girl named Mira sat on the floor beside her brother Tommy. The air smelled of old machinery and dry rust. Their small heater hummed weakly, giving only a faint warmth. Mira held a cracked metal bowl in her hand, scraping the last bit of grain from the bottom. She passed it to Tommy and said, "Eat it, Tommy. You need it more than me." Tommy shook his head. "You are hungry too, Mira." Mira smiled softly, hiding her pain. Her left leg was wrapped in a rough brace made from old mining scrap. A few months ago, one of the colony's supply drones had crashed near their house. She had run to get parts before others took them, but a steel panel had fallen and crushed her leg. The wound healed unevenly, leaving her with a limp that made walking slow and painful. Their stepmother, Rena, stood near the doorway, her arms crossed. She watched them with cold eyes. "Stop wasting food," she said sharply. "That's all we have until next week. And don't expect me to feed you more. I have my own meals to worry about." Mira lowered her eyes. She had learned not to argue. Rena was not cruel in words, but she never cared. She worked as a trader in the lower docks, often returning home with small containers of processed food. She ate well, but the children got the leftovers. Mira could never forget how different life was when her real mother was alive. Her mother had worked in the oxygen farm, checking pressure valves and nutrient tanks. She used to tell Mira stories about Earth, a world full of trees and oceans. Mira never saw such things, only endless red dust and cold metal. Then one day a reactor fire swept through the mining zone. Her mother and father were both gone, leaving her and Tommy under Rena's care. The days became long and empty after that. Rena sold most of the family's possessions to pay her debts. She kept the children inside most of the time, saying it was safer. But Mira knew the real reason. People in the colony were poor. Some took children and sold them to the factories for credit tokens. Rena feared losing her source of free labor. Every morning, Mira woke before sunrise. She checked the water filters, cleaned the waste pipes, and tried to fix the broken lights. Tommy, though only 4, helped her carry small tools. They often whispered to each other while they worked. "Mira, do you think Father will come back?" Tommy asked one day. Mira looked at him and gently brushed his hair. "He is watching us from the stars, so we must be strong." Tommy nodded and smiled faintly. That smile kept her moving even when her leg hurt so much that she wanted to cry. That evening, the sky turned darker than usual. The air filters in their shelter began to buzz. It meant another dust storm was coming. The walls shuddered under the wind's pressure. Rena sealed the outer door and sat by her heater, sipping warm broth. She did not look at the children. Mira and Tommy sat close to each other, wrapped in an old blanket. They listened to the roaring wind outside. The thin walls creaked and sand blew through tiny cracks. Mira thought about how many storms they had already survived. The storms were strong, but she always found a way to protect her brother. When the heater flickered out, Tommy shivered. Mira rubbed his hands and said, "We will be fine. The storm will end soon," but it did not. The storm raged through the night and into the next morning. When the dust finally settled, the settlement's main water line was damaged. Without clean water, people started fighting at the public pump. Rena told the children to stay inside. She left to find food and did not return until late evening. When she came back, she looked angry and tired. "Did you get food?" Mira asked quietly. Rena threw a small packet on the floor. "That's all I got." "Don't ask for more." Mira opened it. Inside were a few nutrient bars, dry and stale. She broke one in half and gave most of it to Tommy. The boy ate slowly, his eyes dull. Mira saved a tiny piece for herself. Days passed. The air in the shelter grew worse. Rena sold their spare oxygen filters to a trader. Mira noticed her stepmother's pockets full of credit chips. She wanted to ask why, but fear stopped her. One night, Mira woke up coughing. The air felt heavy. The monitor light blinked red, warning of low oxygen. She checked the control panel and saw the level dropping. She ran to Rena's room. "The air is low," she said. "We need to replace the filter." Rena turned in her chair and frowned. "We don't have any new filters. Go back to sleep." Mira looked at the drawer beside her. It was half open and she saw 2 unused filters inside. "You do have them," she said softly. "Please, Tommy cannot breathe well." Rena's voice turned cold. "Those are mine. You will not touch them. If you cannot live with less air, that's your problem." Mira froze. She felt a lump in her throat but said nothing. She walked back to Tomi, who lay weakly on the floor. She sat beside him, holding his hand through the night. The next morning, Mira tried to open the air vent to let in more flow, but the outer valve was jammed. She looked out the narrow window and saw the colony's skyline through the haze. Somewhere beyond those towers were the upper districts, where the rich lived under clean domes. People there had gardens, food, and bright lights. Mira had heard about them from a kind worker who once visited their area. She thought, if she could only reach that place, Tomi might have a chance to live better. But it was far, across the wastelands and checkpoints guarded by drones. No one from the lower colony dared to go there without permission. That afternoon, Rena brought a man to the shelter. He wore a gray coat and had a datapad in his hand. Mira and Tomi watched from the corner as they talked quietly. Rena said, "I cannot keep feeding them. They are just extra mouths. If you can take them to the plant, I will accept half payment now." Mira did not understand what she meant, but the man's words made her uneasy. "I can take one tomorrow," he said. "The boy looks weaker." "He will not complain," Rena nodded. "Fine, come before sunrise. Less attention that way." When they left, Mira sat frozen. She could not breathe properly. Her heart beat fast as if it would burst. She crawled to Tomi and held him tight. "Tomi," she whispered, "we cannot stay here. We have to go before morning." Tomi looked frightened. "Where will we go?" She thought hard. "To the tower outside the east gate. There are lights there. Maybe someone will help us." She packed a small bag with the last piece of bread and a cracked water bottle. She tied her leg brace tighter. Every movement hurt, but she did not stop. She found an old cloth and wrapped it around Tomi to keep him warm. When night fell, she listened carefully. Rena was asleep in her chair, holding her datapad. The lights flickered low. Mira waited until she was sure the woman would not wake. Then she took Tomi's hand and opened the back hatch quietly. The cold air rushed in, filled with dust and the faint smell of metal. The ground outside was rough, covered in red sand and scattered wires. Mira stepped out slowly, pulling Tomi along. The brace on her leg squeaked and she winced in pain, but she kept moving. They walked through narrow alleys between metal walls. The sky glowed faintly orange from the colony's reactors. Mira guided Tomi toward the old supply tunnels that led to the outer edge. She had seen miners go that way before. As they reached the exit, a soft rumble grew behind them. The power grid flickered and alarms sounded in the distance. Mira looked back at the shelter one last time. She saw the small window glowing with Rena's lamp. She knew the woman would wake soon. She whispered, "We must hurry." They stepped into the open wasteland. The sand stretched endlessly ahead. The wind blew against their faces, carrying fine grains that stung their skin. Mira adjusted her scarf and shielded Tomi with her arm. Her leg trembled with every step, but she pushed through the pain. Each footstep left a small print that the wind quickly erased. The stars above were dim behind the red haze. She wondered if her parents could see them from beyond the stars, watching her now. Tomi began to cry softly. "Mira, I'm tired." "I know," she said gently. "But we must reach the tower before morning." They kept walking. The ground sloped downward toward the valley where the beacon tower stood, its light barely visible through the dust. The colony's walls faded behind them. Mira felt fear, but also a strange hope. For the first time, she was free of Rena's shadow. She looked at her brother and whispered, "We will make it, Tomi, I promise." In that moment, a distant rumble of thunder rolled across the wasteland. A new storm was forming far to the east. The wind picked up speed. Mira tightened her grip on her brother's hand. She knew the journey had just begun. The little girl with the broken leg, carrying her starving brother through the endless red storm, moved forward step by step. No one saw her yet, but fate was already watching. Somewhere high above the clouds, a machine's lens turned and focused on the small figures below, recording every move they made. The wind of Delta Haven's wasteland howled like a living creature. The red sand swirled across the valley, turning the air thick and dry. Small stones rolled across the ground, carried by the restless storm. Mira walked slowly, her leg brace pressing against her skin. Each step felt like fire, yet she refused to stop. She held Tomi's hand tightly, pulling him forward through the growing wind. Tomi coughed. His voice was faint. "Mira, I cannot see the tower." "It is there," Mira said, her eyes squinting through the haze. "Look for the light." The beacon tower was far away, just a pale shape behind the dust. It was an old communication post used by miners before it broke years ago. Mira had heard from others that it still had a small shelter at its base. She hoped they could rest there until the storm ended. The wind struck their faces again. The dust bit their skin like tiny needles. Mira bent forward to shield Tommy with her small body. Her arms ached, but she did not care. Every time she looked at him, she saw her parents' faces. She remembered her mother's voice telling her that people must care for each other, no matter how hard life became. That memory gave her the strength to move again. They crossed a stretch of ground covered in broken pipes. The pipes hissed as they leaked thin streams of air from the old mining network. Mira stepped carefully, making sure Tommy did not fall. Her brace caught on a wire once, pulling her leg back sharply. Pain shot up through her knee, but she kept moving. Behind them, the colony's lights had almost disappeared. The world had turned into shades of red and brown. The sky was heavy and the air vibrated with the storm's growl. Tommy stumbled and fell. Mira quickly knelt beside him. "You have to stand, Tommy," she said gently. He looked at her with wide eyes. "I am tired." Mira pulled him close and said softly, "I know, but if we stop now, the storm will cover us." "We must find the tower," she helped him up. Together, they continued walking. Time passed slowly, measured by the rhythm of her steps and his small breaths. The wind tore at their clothes, but Mira's grip never loosened. After some distance, they reached a low ridge. From the top, the ground sloped toward the shadow of the beacon tower. Mira saw its thin shape rising above the dust like a ghost. A faint blue light blinked near its top. Relief filled her heart. "There," she whispered. "We are close," Tommy smiled weakly. "You found it." They climbed down the ridge. The slope was covered with loose gravel and Mira's leg trembled. Halfway down, her foot slipped. She fell onto her side, sliding a few meters before stopping. Pain spread through her injured leg, but she bit her lip and stood again. Tommy rushed to her side, crying. "I am fine," she said, forcing a smile. "Do not cry, Tommy." Together they moved toward the tower's base. The wind grew stronger, carrying a strange low sound. The sky darkened further, turning almost black. Mira looked up and saw the outline of a large storm cloud moving fast. Lightning flickered inside it, silent but bright. She felt fear rise in her chest, yet her feet kept moving. When they reached the tower, Mira saw a small metal door partly buried in sand. She brushed the sand away and pulled it open. The hinges creaked and a wave of stale air came out. Inside was a small control room with broken panels and dusty floors. She guided Tommy in and closed the door behind them. The sound of the storm faded a little. Mira helped Tommy sit on the floor. He was shaking from cold and exhaustion. She took off her scarf and wrapped it around him. Then she opened the small bag and handed him the last piece of bread. "Eat this," she said. He broke it in half and tried to share. "You too, Mira." She smiled and shook her head. "Later, you need strength first." Tommy ate slowly. Mira looked around the room. The lights on the panels were dead except for one faint glow near the corner. She walked over to it and brushed away the dust. The light came from an old emergency beacon still running on a weak power cell. It blinked once every few seconds, sending a tiny signal into the sky. Mira did not know it yet, but that weak signal would soon reach someone far above. After a short while, the wind outside roared louder. The door rattled under pressure. Mira could feel the vibrations through the floor. She sat beside Tommy and held his hand again. He rested his head on her shoulder and soon fell asleep. Mira stayed awake, listening to the storm. She thought about Rena's house, the small heater, the smell of burnt food and the cold silence. She did not miss that life. She felt free now, even though she was afraid. Her leg throbbed painfully and her body felt heavy, but her heart was calm. She knew she had done the right thing. Hours passed. The storm raged outside while the beacon light kept blinking. In orbit high above the planet, a satellite detected that signal. The data was automatically sent to a control room on a ship belonging to Commander Halden, a retired engineer who now lived in space. Halden had been running a private network that watched over abandoned colonies and failed mining sites. He believed that every human outpost deserved help, even if governments had forgotten them. He was a quiet man who spent his days checking drone feeds and energy reports. That evening, his monitor showed a blinking alert from Delta Haven. He leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. "Strange," he said to himself. "That beacon was dead years ago." He opened the live drone feed. The camera zoomed in on the area near the beacon tower. Through the swirling dust, two small figures appeared. The video was faint, but Halden could see movement. One figure was larger, pulling the smaller one. They moved slowly, almost crawling toward the tower. Halden frowned. Children. He enhanced the image. The taller one seemed to limp badly. The smaller one was being dragged carefully. Halden watched in silence as the taller child opened the old door and helped the other inside. Then the storm covered the view completely. He leaned back in his chair. The image stayed in his mind. In all his years working on the colonies, he had seen hardship, but there was something different about this. The way the child had moved, the way they refused to stop even with the storm closing in, reminded him of humanity's earliest settlers. He whispered softly, "That is courage." Halden opened the communication log and checked the colony's records. Delta Haven had been downgraded to a low-priority zone after the mining fire. Most people there lived in poverty. No recent aid shipments had arrived for months. He felt a heavy weight in his chest. He called his assistant, a young pilot named Lena. "Prepare a shuttle," he said. "We are going down to Delta Haven." "Now, sir?" she asked in surprise. "Yes, there are 2 children out there. We cannot wait." Back on the planet, the storm slowly began to ease. The roar softened to a whisper. Inside the tower, Mira woke to silence. The floor was cold and her body was stiff. Tommy was still sleeping beside her. She stretched her leg carefully and looked at the weak light on the beacon. It was still blinking. She felt hope. Maybe someone would see it. Maybe there were kind people beyond the sky who still cared about children like them. She opened the door slightly. The air was clearer now, though the sky was still red. The land looked endless and quiet. She stepped outside, breathing deeply. The wind carried the smell of iron and dust, but also something fresh, like the start of a new day. Tommy walked out beside her, holding her hand. "Is the storm gone?" he asked. "Yes," she said softly. "We made it through." They sat together on a rock near the tower. Mira looked at the horizon. She wondered what they would do next. The colony's border was far behind them. Ahead was only the empty land. Still, she believed that someone would find them. High above, Commander Halden's shuttle entered the atmosphere. The ship's hull glowed as it cut through the thin clouds. Inside, Halden watched the coordinates on his screen. "Hold steady," he said. "We will land near the old tower." Lena nodded. Signal from the beacon is weak but still active. As the shuttle descended, Mira saw a bright light moving across the sky. She pointed at it. "Look, Tommy." Tommy's eyes widened. "Is it a star?" Mira stared as the light grew larger. "No, it is coming down." The shuttle's engine slowed as it approached the ground. Dust rose in waves. Mira covered Tommy's face with her scarf. The ship landed gently a few meters away from the tower. For a moment, everything was still. Then the ramp lowered and figures in clean suits stepped out. Mira's heart raced. She did not know who they were. She took a step back, ready to protect her brother. One of the figures raised a hand and spoke through a speaker. "Do not be afraid. We are here to help." The voice was calm and kind. Mira looked at Tommy, then at the man walking toward them. His face was lined with age and his eyes were full of concern. He knelt down so that his face was level with hers. "My name is Halden," he said. "You are safe now." Mira did not answer at first. She just stared, trying to understand if this was real. Halden opened a small pack and handed her a piece of bread and a bottle of water. The sight of clean water made her eyes fill with tears. "Drink," he said gently. "There is plenty more." She gave the bottle to Tommy first, just as she always did. Halden watched this small act and felt something move deep inside him. He saw in her the spirit that had built humanity's world among the stars. As the wind settled and the sky brightened, Mira and Tommy stood beside Halden's team. For the first time, they felt warmth that was not from a broken heater but from human kindness. Above them, the beacon tower's light blinked one last time before fading. It had done its job. It had called hope from the heavens. Inside the shuttle, the hum of engines filled the air. The walls were silver and bright, unlike anything Mira had ever seen. She sat on a soft seat beside her brother Tommy, holding his hand tightly. Her eyes moved from one corner of the cabin to another, amazed by the smooth metal and glowing screens. Commander Halden stood near the window, speaking quietly to his pilot, Lena. The ship had just left the surface and was climbing toward the upper atmosphere. Outside, the red dust of Delta Haven faded into the distance. Halden looked back at the 2 children. Their clothes were torn, their faces pale from hunger and exhaustion. Yet there was something strong about them. The little girl sat upright, her eyes alert, as if ready to face the whole universe if she had to. Lena came closer and whispered, "Sir, we have cleared the lower storm zone. Oxygen levels are stable. We should reach the main ship in 10 minutes. Good," Halden said. "Prepare the medical bay. They both need care." Mira watched them talk, not understanding all the words. When Halden turned to her, she looked down nervously. "You do not need to be afraid," Halden said softly. "You are safe here." She nodded but stayed quiet. Tommy looked up at him and asked, "Are you from the stars?" Halden smiled. "In a way, yes. I live in a ship above the planet. We help places that have been forgotten." Tommy's eyes widened. "Do you have food?" "Yes," Halden said. "You will have as much as you need." When the shuttle docked with the main ship, the airlock opened with a hiss. Mira felt a rush of clean, cool air. It smelled like metal and flowers. Two medics in white suits approached gently. One knelt in front of her. "Can you walk?" he asked kindly. Mira hesitated. "I can, but my leg hurts." He examined the brace made of scrap metal and shook his head in surprise. "You made this yourself?" She nodded. "I had to, or I could not move." The medic looked at Halden. "She is resourceful." Halden smiled faintly. "Human spirit always finds a way." They helped Mira and Tommy onto a stretcher platform that floated silently through the corridors. The lights along the walls changed color as they passed. Mira had never seen such brightness. Every door opened automatically when they approached, and the air was warm and gentle. In the medical bay, the children were given clean clothes and water. Mira's brace was carefully removed, and her leg was placed in a healing cast. Tommy's thin arms were covered with small sensors that monitored his heartbeat. When they had eaten, both of them fell asleep on soft beds. Halden stood by the window, looking down at the planet below. Delta Haven looked peaceful from up here, a quiet ball of red and gold. But he knew the truth hidden under that beauty: poverty, neglect, and forgotten people. Lena joined him. "They are safe now," she said. "But what will you do next?" Halden crossed his arms. "I want to know how children like these were left behind. The colony was supposed to receive aid months ago. Someone failed them." He opened the data files from Delta Haven. Most records were incomplete. The last report from local authorities was nearly 2 years old. Supplies had been reduced to a fraction of the normal level. Halden's jaw tightened. He said quietly, "We built our empire on human strength and courage, yet we let places like this rot in silence. That little girl dragged her brother across a wasteland because no one else would help. We owe her more than rescue." Lena nodded. "She is brave." "She is more than brave," Halden said. "She is proof of what it means to be human." Hours later, Mira woke up. She blinked at the bright ceiling and tried to sit. The cast on her leg felt strange but painless. Tommy was sleeping beside her, holding a small stuffed animal that one of the crew had given him. Halden entered quietly. "You are feeling better?" Mira nodded. "Yes, thank you." He smiled. "You are very strong, Mira. You saved your brother's life. Not many grown people could do what you did." She looked down. "I just did not want him to be hurt." "That is what makes you strong," Halden said. He pulled a chair and sat near her. "Can you tell me about your home?" Mira told him. About Delta Haven, about the small shelter, the broken air filters, and how Rena sold their food and tokens. She spoke in a calm voice, but Halden could feel the pain behind every word. He listened carefully, asking gentle questions. "Did you ever see government workers? Anyone who came to check your living area?" "No," she said. "No one came. People said help only goes to the upper levels." Halden sighed. "That should never happen." When she finished, he looked thoughtful for a long time. Then he said, "Mira, I want you to rest now. You and Tommy will stay here with us. We will take care of you." "Will we go back to the planet?" she asked softly. "Not yet," he said. But we will go back one day. We have work to do there. Later that day, Halden gathered his officers in the control room. The ship's main screen showed a map of Delta Haven. He pointed at the central sector. Here is where most people live, he said. Their air systems are failing and food rations are limited. No proper repairs have been made in years. One officer asked, "Sir, why has the main council not sent support?" Halden replied, "Because they have turned their eyes away, but we will not. This ship has enough supplies to help thousands. We will send drones with food, filters, and medicine." Lena smiled. "You sound like the commander you used to be." Halden gave a small laugh. "Maybe I am again. That little girl reminded me why we built ships in the first place, to protect each other." Down in the medical bay, Mira and Tommy were awake again. The crew had brought them warm soup. Tommy laughed as he tried to use the metal spoon. Mira watched him, her heart full of relief. For the first time in her life, she did not feel fear in the air. When Halden came to see them again, Mira said, "You are helping people like my mother wanted to." Halden looked surprised. "Your mother wanted to help people?" "Yes," Mira said. "She said humans must care for each other because stars are far and cold." Halden felt his chest tighten. "Your mother was wise." He looked out the window again. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the glass. He thought about how many people were still struggling on forgotten worlds. He made a silent promise that this would change. The next morning, Halden's drones descended to Delta Haven carrying supplies. The colony workers stared in disbelief as the machines dropped crates of food and filters near the main square. Word spread quickly that someone in orbit had noticed them. Back on the ship, Mira watched the feed on a small screen. She saw the people below cheering. "They are happy," she said with a smile. "Yes," Halden said. "They are alive because of you. If you had not reached that tower, we would never have seen your beacon." Mira looked up at him with shining eyes. Then it was not only a tower, it was a light. Halden nodded. A light of hope. That evening, Halden took the children to the observation deck. From there, the planet looked calm and beautiful. He showed them how to use the control panel to zoom in and out of the image. Tommy laughed every time the view changed. "This ship is like magic," he said. "It is not magic," Halden answered. "It is what people can do when they work together." Mira looked thoughtful. "Then maybe one day I can help people too." Halden placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You already have, Mira. You reminded us of who we are." Night on the ship was quiet. The lights dimmed to a soft blue. Mira lay in bed thinking about her parents. She whispered a small thank you to the stars, believing they could hear her. Halden sat in his private room, recording his report. "This rescue shows the strength of human will," he said into the recorder. "Even in the darkest places, the human heart keeps shining. A 6-year-old girl walked through a storm to save her brother. We must honor that courage by ensuring no one else is left behind." He turned off the recorder and looked out at the endless space beyond the glass. Somewhere below, the beacon tower still stood, half buried in sand, but now it was part of a new story. The next day, Lena brought news that more colonies nearby were in similar trouble. Halden decided to extend their mission. "We will not only save these two," he said. "We will save as many as we can." Mira watched from the corridor as the crew prepared the next launch. She could not understand all their words, but she knew they were working hard to help others. She smiled proudly. Tommy ran up to her with a small communicator in his hand. "Look, Mira, it can talk." She laughed softly. "You are learning fast," he grinned. "Maybe one day we can go to other worlds too." "Maybe we will," she said. From the command deck, Halden watched them. He knew their journey was far from over. The children had escaped pain, but they had also brought a message stronger than any speech. Humanity was still good at heart. As the ship drifted in orbit, the stars outside shone brighter. The story of 2 children from a forgotten colony had begun to spread through the network. Pilots, traders, and engineers shared the tale of the little girl who dragged her brother through a storm. To them, She became a symbol of what it meant to be human, never to give up, even when the world turned against you. And high above Delta, Haven Halden's ship prepared to bring hope to more places, guided by the memory of a child's courage. The wind was silent over the wasteland after the storm had passed. The red dust had settled like a thick blanket over the wrecked beacon tower, hiding everything under its dull color. Only a faint glow came from a broken lamp that flickered weakly near the fallen structure. Inside that broken shell, Mira sat holding her brother close, her small frame shaking from exhaustion. Her leg brace was cracked and her hands were covered in dust, but her grip on Tommy was strong. He slept against her arm, his breathing soft and slow. She looked at the sky through a small opening above her. It was filled with strange moving lights. She thought they were stars, but they were moving faster than any star she had seen before. Her heart wanted to believe they were rescuers. She whispered softly to Tommy, telling him they would be safe soon. The wind outside carried her weak voice into the cold air of Delta Haven's wasteland. Far above the planet, Commander Halden stood near the viewing glass of his private shuttle. He had been awake for more than 20 hours, studying the drone footage of the two children. He had seen every step they took through the storm, every fall, every time the little girl got up again. He felt something inside him that he had not felt for years. When he was young, he had walked those same dusty paths as a miner's son. He knew the taste of hunger and the bite of the dry wind. But he had been lucky to escape that life and build something better. Now seeing Mira and Tommy struggling reminded him that many others were still trapped in the same suffering he had left behind. "Prepare the shuttle for descent," Halden said in a calm but firm tone. His crew looked at him with surprise. It was rare for the commander to go planetside himself. "Sir, the storm has just cleared." "Conditions are unstable," one of the pilots warned. Halden nodded. "Then we will go carefully. But those children do not have time to wait. Ready the medical team and heat capsules. I want to leave in 5 minutes." The crew obeyed without question. Within minutes, the shuttle's engines came alive. The sleek silver craft lowered through the thick air of Delta Haven, cutting through layers of orange haze. As they neared the surface, the scanners picked up 2 faint life signals near the coordinates the drone had last marked. Halden stood near the ramp, dressed in a light protective suit. The shuttle touched down near the broken beacon, kicking up clouds of red dust. The ramp lowered slowly, and the first rays of pale sunlight fell across the ground. When Halden stepped outside, he saw the small figure of Mira curled beside her brother. Her head lifted weakly when the noise reached her. She blinked against the light, unsure if she was dreaming. The man walking toward her looked unreal, like someone out of a story. His suit shone softly in the light, and behind him a few people carried glowing medical boxes. "It's all right," Halden said gently, his voice clear and kind. "You are safe now." Mira held her brother tighter and tried to back away. Her eyes were filled with fear and confusion. "Please don't take him. He's hungry. He's just sleeping," she said softly. Halden stopped a few steps away, lowering his hands. "I am not here to hurt you," he said. "My name is Halden. I came to help." The doctor knelt beside Mira, scanning her with a handheld device. "Broken leg, dehydration, malnutrition," the doctor reported quietly. Halden's face grew firm with concern. "Give them water," Halden said. "Start with small sips." The doctor handed Mira a small pouch. She hesitated for a moment before giving it to Tommy first. Even in her weakness, she thought of him before herself. Halden saw this and felt his chest tighten. He had seen courage in soldiers, bravery in explorers, but never in someone so small. When Tommy woke, he blinked at the sight of strangers. Mira stroked his hair. "It's all right," she whispered. "They will help us." The medical team carried both children into the shuttle. Inside, warm air filled the cabin, and bright lights replaced the dusty red gloom of the surface. Mira felt the soft cushion of a seat for the first time in her life. She looked around in wonder, afraid it would all vanish if she blinked too long. Halden sat near her, watching as the doctor cleaned her wounds and placed a new brace on her leg. "You were very brave," he said softly. "You walked through that storm to save your brother. Do you know how strong that makes you?" Mira looked at him with wide eyes. "I just didn't want him to die," she said in a quiet voice. "I didn't want to leave him with her. She said we were not worth the air." Halden's heart ached at those words. He looked out the window as the shuttle lifted off. "You are worth far more than you know," he said. "More than anyone has told you." The shuttle rose above the storm clouds and entered the bright light of the upper atmosphere. Mira pressed her hand to the window, staring at the endless sky. It was the first time she had seen the world from above. She could see the golden line of sunrise stretching across the horizon. Tommy, now wrapped in a blanket, leaned against her shoulder, his small smile returning for the first time in weeks. Hours later, they arrived at Halden's main orbital station. The vast structure floated like a city in the sky, filled with gardens, lights, and quiet music that played in the halls. Mira and Tommy were taken to a recovery room where warm meals and clean water waited. They ate slowly, unsure if it was real. Halden watched from outside the glass wall. He felt both pride and shame. Pride that he could help. Shame that such suffering still existed in his colony. He called for his assistant. "I want full reports on the lower district's living conditions," he ordered. "And find out who is responsible for those children being left like that." The assistant nodded quickly. "Yes, Commander." "And the children?" "They stay here," Halden said. "They will not go back." Later that evening, Halden entered the recovery room. Mira was sitting up, looking at a small book she found on the table. It showed pictures of the first settlers who had come to Delta Haven generations ago. "They came from another world," she said, her voice full of wonder. "They were brave." Halden smiled faintly. "They were, just like you." She shook her head. "I was scared all the time." "Being brave does not mean you are not scared," Halden said. "It means you keep going even when you are scared." Mira looked down at her leg brace, now clean and shining. "Will I walk again?" "Yes," Halden said firmly. "You will walk, and one day, you will run." Over the next few days, Mira and Tommy began to heal. They met other children who lived on the station, children of workers and scientists. For the first time, they played, laughed, and slept without fear. But even as Mira's leg began to mend, she still asked about the people back in Delta Haven. "Will they be safe now?" she asked one morning. Halden looked thoughtful. "Not yet," he admitted. "But your story will help them. People will see what you did. They will remember what courage means." A few days later, Halden held a meeting with the colony council. He showed them the recordings from his drone, a little girl dragging her brother through the dust storm, refusing to give up. The room fell silent as they watched. "This," Halden said, pointing to the screen, "is the spirit of humanity. This is what we were meant to protect. We build machines, cities, and ships, but this is what gives them meaning. If a 6-year-old can fight for life like this, what excuse do we have for doing less?" The council members bowed their heads. One of them said softly, "What do you suggest, Commander?" "Reform," Halden replied. "No more hunger in the lower levels. Every child will have food, water, and schooling. We will rebuild Delta Haven, not as a mine, but as a home." The decision was made that day. The colony's policies changed. Supply lines were redirected, housing was repaired, and new schools were opened. Workers began to believe again that things could improve. Meanwhile, Mira and Tommy were given a small room near Halden's quarters. He often visited them, bringing books and stories from other colonies. Mira listened with bright eyes, dreaming of stars and new worlds. Halden arranged for her to receive a special brace made with advanced metal that would help her walk freely again. One morning, when Mira took her first steps without falling, the entire medical team cheered. Tommy clapped his small hands and laughed. Halden stood at the door, smiling quietly. "You did it," he said. Mira nodded proudly. "I will walk again on Delta Haven," she said. "I want to see it when it is better." Halden looked at her, seeing in her not just a survivor but a symbol. "You will," he promised, "and everyone will know your name." That night, as the stars glimmered outside the station's large windows, Halden knew that humanity had been reminded of its greatest strength. Not power or technology, but the simple courage of a small child who refused to let go of hope. The stars above Delta Haven shone brighter than ever before. The stormy clouds that once covered the colony had cleared, and the sun rose over the red dust plains, turning them into fields of golden light. It had been 3 months since Mira and Tommy were rescued by Commander Halden. In that time, everything had changed. Delta Haven was no longer a place of hunger and silence. The colony buzzed with activity. New homes were being built, machines repaired, and clean water stations had been set up in every district. The people who once worked tired and hopeless now moved with purpose. For the first time in years, laughter could be heard in the streets. In one of the open courtyards, a large gathering had formed. Children played near the fountain while workers stood around. watching as a new building was unveiled. The sign above read, Haven's Light Education Center. The school was built in honor of Mira and Tomi, whose story had inspired everyone. Inside the station above the planet, Mira stood near the wide window of Commander Halden's office, looking down at the colony. Her leg was now healed, and her new brace was made of light metal that allowed her to walk easily. She had grown stronger, her cheeks filled with color, her eyes bright. Tomi stood beside her, holding a small model ship Halden had given him. He pretended it was flying over the colony. "Do you think they can see us from down there?" he asked. Mira smiled. "Maybe, but what matters is that they can live better now." Halden entered the room quietly. He carried a tray with warm drinks and placed it near them. "The first class starts today," he said with a gentle smile. "Your names are on the wall of the school. Every child will learn about what you did." Mira looked shyly at him. "I don't want them to think I am special. I just wanted to help my brother." Halden nodded slowly. "That is exactly what makes you special. You did something many grown people would have been afraid to do." He walked closer to the window, looking down at the colony below. "When I was young, I dreamed of a place where no one had to suffer like we did. For years I worked, built ships, earned money, but I forgot the reason I started. You reminded me." Mira looked up at him. "Then maybe I can help others remember too." Halden smiled. "You already have." The days that followed were full of new beginnings. Mira and Tomi moved to the planet with Halden to help open the new school. They were greeted by cheers from the colony's people, who had heard their story. Workers lifted their helmets and saluted. Mothers held their children close, whispering that they should be brave like Mira. The colony council gathered to honor Halden's efforts and to thank Mira and Tomi. A stage was built in the center square, decorated with lights made from recycled power cells. As the crowd gathered, Halden stepped up to the microphone. Mira and Tomi stood beside him, holding hands. Halden began to speak. 3 months ago, this colony was on the edge of losing hope. We had forgotten what it meant to care for one another. But then a child reminded us. Mira, with a broken leg and a heart full of courage, dragged her brother through a storm because she refused to give up. She showed us what it truly means to be human. The crowd grew silent, every face turned toward the small girl. Halden continued, "Today, Delta Haven stands again, stronger than before. Not because of wealth, not because of power, but because of compassion. This colony is no longer just a place to work. It is a home. And from this day forward, it will carry a new name, Haven's Light." The crowd erupted in applause. Mira looked at Tomi, who smiled proudly at her. She did not know how to feel with so many eyes watching, but deep inside she felt warmth. It was not pride, but peace. After the ceremony, Mira walked through the new streets. The air was clean and people greeted her kindly. She saw children running around with clean clothes and food stalls full of fresh produce. She passed by a group of miners repairing a generator. One of them looked up and waved. "You're the girl from the storm," he said with a grin. "You helped change everything." Mira smiled softly. "Everyone helped," she said. "I just wanted my brother to be safe." She stopped near the school and watched the first class begin. The teacher showed pictures of the colony before and after the reforms. On the wall, a large mural showed Mira dragging Tomi through the storm, painted in soft colors. The caption below read, "Strength of the smallest." Later that evening, Halden invited Mira and Tomi to the top of the colony's new energy tower. From there, they could see the whole settlement glowing with life. The wind was calm and the air smelled of metal and earth. "This is your home now," Halden said. "You helped build its new heart." Mira looked across the horizon. "Will other colonies change too?" Halden nodded. "They already have. News of what you did has reached other systems. People are beginning to demand better lives. They say if a little girl could face a storm for her brother, then they can face their own hardships too." Mira listened quietly. "I didn't mean to start something big," she said. "I only wanted to do what was right." "That is how great things begin," Halden said softly. Weeks passed, and Mira began studying at the new school. She learned about planets, stars, and machines. She loved the lessons about the first human explorers who left Earth to build new worlds. She dreamed of becoming one herself someday. Tomi, still younger, loved to play with small drones and always talked about becoming a pilot. One afternoon while studying, Mira received a message from Halden. He asked her to come to the observatory at sunset. When she arrived, the sky outside was a mix of red and gold. Halden was there, standing near a small shuttle painted white. "This is for you," he said. Mira stared at the small ship, her eyes wide. "For me?" Halden smiled. "For you and Tommy, it's a training shuttle. You are old enough to start learning how to fly. I believe one day you will travel beyond Delta Haven, and when you do, I want you to carry our story with you." Mira ran her hand over the smooth metal. "Will you come with us?" Halden shook his head. "Not always. My time will end one day. But you will see many more suns." She looked at him, feeling a mix of sadness and gratitude. "I will make you proud," she said. "You already have," he replied. The next morning, Mira and Tommy began their first flying lesson. With the guidance of a pilot from the station, they lifted off the ground slowly. Mira's hands trembled as she touched the controls, but she smiled when she saw the colony shrinking below. The ship rose into the open sky where the stars waited. From the window, Tommy pressed his face against the glass. "We're flying," he said, his voice full of joy. "Yes," Mira said softly. "And we're free." As the shuttle circled above Haven's Light, Mira saw the new fields, the rebuilt homes, and the shining towers. For a moment, she remembered the night she carried her brother through the storm. The pain, the fear, the cold, all of it felt far away now. What remained was strength. Halden watched their ship from the ground. His eyes followed the small white dot moving across the sky. He smiled, knowing that the future of humanity was safe in hands like theirs. That night, the people of Haven's Light held a festival under the open sky. Lights floated in the air like tiny stars, music played, and children danced. Mira and Tommy joined them, laughing and running through the crowd. Halden stood on a platform watching them. He turned to one of his officers and said, "When people talk about humanity's greatness, they often mention technology or discovery. But true greatness begins with kindness and courage. Remember that." The officer nodded, understanding. As the festival continued, Mira looked up at the stars. She whispered quietly, "Thank you," though she did not know if she was speaking to the universe, her lost parents, or Halden. Maybe to all of them. The night sky sparkled like a sea of diamonds. The colony below glowed with life. The once broken girl and her brother were no longer symbols of sadness but of hope. Years later, Mira would grow into one of the youngest explorers to leave Delta Haven, carrying with her the same spirit that once made her walk through the storm. Wherever she went, people would remember the story of a small girl who proved that even in the darkest places, humanity's light never dies, and so under the endless stars, the colony called Haven's Light became more than a name. It became a promise that no matter how far humanity traveled, they would never forget the power of compassion, courage, and the bond between a sister and her brother.